Welcome back to the Art of the Paint podcast. I am your host, Tyler DeLuca, and I know it's been a couple of weeks. I understand. I apologize for the absence. It's the end of the semester, finals, all that. Kicked my ass. But I'm back. The WNBA is back. So let's kind of look back at these opening weekend games, some of the performances we saw. I got three topics that I really want to talk about. Some of them players, some of them teams. But I want to start off with the Indiana Fever. And I got some mixed feelings. I really do. We'll start off with the good. And there's one really good thing about this Indiana Fever team, and that's Destiny Henderson. Because absolutely anything is possible when you have Destiny Henderson handling the ball. And honestly, in the game, in their game, she looked like the only competent player on the floor. And it's kind of harsh, but against the Sparks, it felt like she was the only time that the Fever were able to do anything with the ball on offense was when the ball was in her hands. She was probing into the paint, kicking it out. They were missing shots, but they were good looks. She would have had even better stats had she been able to get those looks to fall by her teammates. But everything just seemed off and weird whenever the ball wasn't in Destiny Henderson's hands. And it got me thinking, I know this is way too early. I understand we're just getting started, but hey, what else is a podcast for than to get some hot takes off early on to the season when there's barely any footage to look at? Because that's what I'm here for. Destiny Henderson is looking like the best draft pick on the Fever right now. And I think it's interesting because if you show someone the Sparks game, and that has no idea about the draft order, nothing like that, and you say, here are the rookies, rank them. Where do you think they got drafted? Destiny Henderson would be their first pick. That's for sure. Destiny Henderson would be the first pick. Nalissa Smith would probably be number two. And Queen Egbo will be number 3. But I'll tell you right now, and let me finish. Let me finish that list. Angsler would be 4. And Hull, who just she just seems out of place, and it's a similar role that she was playing at Stanford that she's in now. It just isn't clicking, and there's time, but as of what I'm seeing right now, that is all I can base myself off right now, and it ain't happening right now. It's not. It is really not. But I want to get back a little bit to Nalissa because I'm a little worried. You know, and as someone, I'm in Big 12 country, I go to OU, I've watched plenty of Baylor basketball. And this is the same Nalissa that we saw at Baylor when it comes to what skills she brings to the table. We know what Nalissa can do, but we also know where she's lacking. She can't really shoot. That's okay, but you gotta work your way around that. She's too small to really be a dominant 4, which is the toughest position in the entire league. There's more star power at the power forward spot than any other place in the entire league. So that puts her in a really weird spot to try and find her place in the league and on this team. And honestly, I don't think the Fever did a great job of incorporating what she does do good at, which is her athleticism, getting down the floor, attacking the rim, those type of things. They didn't really put her in positions to do that, but it goes both ways, where I feel like Nalissa wasn't really doing it either. She wasn't doing it either. And even the body language throughout for Nalissa just seemed off. It was just kind of weird. There was one time an entry pass didn't get to her, and it got swung around, and they tried to get it back to her, and she just wasn't paying attention. And I understand she's the number 2 pick. I understand that. But that doesn't mean anything. Once the regular season gets going, you still got a lot to prove. And I feel like there's times on the court when I was watching the Sparks Fever game where it just felt like Nalissa already thought she was that girl, like she was the one. But the production isn't really saying that yet, which is okay. It's okay that the production isn't there yet. It's okay that you haven't, completely found your footing. And the same way with Hull, that's okay. There's still plenty of time. But when it comes to Nalissa, you can't. It's hard to juggle both in the sense of your attitude being like you are the one, but your production being something completely otherwise. And that's something that I'm really interested in seeing kind of going forward. And I'm interested also in the Fever vets because somebody's got to step up. Obviously, I mean, it's been well documented the amount of youth on this team, but somebody's going to have to step up and be a leader on this team because the fact that it's falling on Destiny Henderson to do right now is pretty crazy. And that's not going to be sustainable going forward. But Destiny Henderson is proving a lot of people right and a whole lot of GMs wrong so far with her performances. And I expect that to be something that continues. And it's going to be, especially when some of the players come back from overseas like Daniel Robinson, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how everything shakes out on the Fever roster, playing time and things of that nature. But I'm going to need to see something from Nalissa because this is the same person that people were saying that should be drafted over Ryan Howard, and she's looked pretty dang good so far. So I'm interested in seeing kind of what that looks like going forward. But next topic, Sabrina Ionescu. And I'm trying my best to keep a level head, to not overreact, because she did this last year too. First game popped off, or it was early in the season, popped off, and then really wasn't able to continue that consistency. But 25 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals against Connecticut. She was hooping. And I love that Sabrina, because Sabrina's not some speedster. I mean, that's just not, it never has been, never will be her game. But the ability to work through the angles that she was showing was an improvement over last season. And that's something I'm really, really excited to see going forward. Because that's what I think is so interesting about the point guard position, is that you can do it in so many different ways. Just talking about Henny, who is this small little speedster that is going to get by you and everything. And Sabrina is a bigger body that is going to use footwork and things of that nature to get by you. And both are totally viable and totally okay. And both can work. And it's so much fun to see. But man, Sabrina looked good. Her game across the board looked really, really well. And now it's just time to do it for the entire season. It's year 3. It's time to take that step. And I'm really, really excited to see what the Liberty as a whole are going to look like this season, because they were missing Didi and Benija, and they still brought it to Connecticut. I mean, Natasha Howard looked fantastic on defense, which, I mean, we knew what we were getting with that. We knew what Howard brought on the defensive end, but it still was just like sometimes so shocking to see what she can do on that side of the ball and how consistent she can be and things of that nature. And especially against Jonquil Jones, who, I mean, we know all about Jones. We know what she brings to the table, and she looked uncomfortable. The Connecticut Sun as a whole just kind of looked uncomfortable. It was weird. It was really, really weird to see them. But I think a lot of that had to do with what New York was bringing to the table. I don't think they ever let Connecticut really settle into the game, and that's going to take you super far. I mean, obviously you have now a winning coach. You have a more solid mix of different age groups on the team. Sabrina, like I said, is entering year 3. Naj just came off that incredible season. Natasha Howard has had success in the past. It really looks like a really, really solid core that I feel like is bound to take that next step this season. And I think that how far that next step goes lies on the shoulders of Sabrina. And I think that's a pressure that she's probably accustomed to at this point, but I think it's the most logical person to look at and be like, okay, wherever this team, how far this team is going to go relies on what you bring, how far you can improve. Because if this Sabrina is the one that we get for the majority of this season, they are going to be a very, very good team. But like I said, we saw this last season. We saw early on she was able to put up some crazy stats, and then it just kind of plateaued a little bit. But if she's able to keep this up, they're going to be very, very, very good. But there's only one team that's looking the best right now. And that's the Las Vegas Aces. Because, they're looking real different. They're looking real different. And I know Bill Laimbeer is somewhere, and he should be absolutely ashamed of himself for what he has done to this roster in the past couple of years, because this is probably a roster that should have won a championship. They really probably should have. And they underperformed every time. And obviously, like I said, these are all very hot takes, fresh off the press. Season just started. But this is a completely different Las Vegas Aces team, which, I mean, everyone kind of expected with Becky Hammon coming in and being on the bench and providing a new voice, a new style, an upgraded, a modern style to what the Aces have. And it just fits the roster so much better. I mean, just the stats already over 2 games. I mean, Chelsea Gray is averaging 11.5 points. Hamby is averaging 17 points and 13 rebounds after that crazy performance against Seattle. Kelsey Plum, 19.7 assists. Jackie Young is averaging damn near 20 points. 19.5. Asia Wilson, who is going to be the MVP this season, is averaging 17.5, 13 rebounds, and 3 blocks. They're just looking different. Across the board, they are looking different. And even in that game, more now, kind of just getting more specific into the game against Seattle, they looked fantastic early on. They really did. On the defensive end, they were working. On offense, they were going, not making any stupid decisions, really none of that. And that's the team that's going to win the championship. That first half Aces team can win the championship. Second half got a little shaky. The second half got just a tiny bit shaky, just a little bit. And we saw how the Storm were able to come back. Kelsey Plum didn't have the best game of her career by any means, but was still able to end up with really solid contributions, especially towards the end. She kind of started picking up a little bit. But I know there's a time where she had like 3 possessions in a row where it was a turnover or missed layups, and it allowed the Storm to close that gap. And realistically, when you're playing a team like the Storm, you can't give them too many opportunities to close gaps. They were able to pull through against the Storm this time, but that's something that the Aces can't get in the habit of doing. I think the biggest thing for them is getting over that Connecticut hump. As soon as they beat Connecticut, I feel like they're going to hit the ground running even more than they are now. And that's going to come later on in the season. But as of now, I don't think any team is comparing to what the Aces are bringing on the offensive side of the ball. And even my biggest worry going into the season, which if you're listening to the community space and stuff like that, it's something that we've talked about. It's their depth inside, what size they can bring in, what size they can put alongside Asia Wilson to kind of help her on the defensive end. But against the Storm, they were fine. And not only fine, they dominated inside, and it totally threw me off guard. They won the rebounding battle 45-30. In paint scoring, they won 42-16, which is insane. That's not just winning, that's dominating. That's dominating inside the paint, the place that's supposed to be their weakest spot. I know on defense, my biggest worry for them is when Asia Wilson gets brought out on a pick and roll or gets closer to the perimeter, who's going to be that help side defense? And there was a couple times they got caught out. But overall, the Aces looked really good. Across the board, they looked really good. And like I said, kind of tapered off a little bit into that second half. But that first half Aces team, I don't think anyone can beat them. I really don't. And it's something I'm really excited to see going forward, to see how all these players, because, I mean, this is just game 2. They're just getting started. And they've already beat Phoenix and Seattle with a completely new system being implemented in. And not even just like a new coach and everything, but the system as a whole is completely different. It's completely different from what Laimbeer had. Asia Wilson made a 3. Laimbeer would have put her at the end of the bench if she did that in previous years. It was fun to watch. I think they're the best team in the league right now. I think Asia Wilson is going to win the MVP. Everything is lining up for me right now. Whereas out of all the women's basketball I watched this weekend, all the WNBA basketball I watched, no team matches up with the Aces. No team looks like them. And if this is something that they can keep up, if they're doing it this early on, there's a long season to go. But if they're able to keep this momentum up, I absolutely think that they're going to win the WNBA championship this year. But that's going to do it for me here on the Art of the Paint for this week. Make sure you rate if you're on a podcast app. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for Art of the Paint.